Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Leah Coates, and these are my teammates, Katie Athide and Ariana Parsons. And today we'd like to tell you a little bit about our JPC project, which was developing a sustainable business strategy for women in Monduli, Tanzania. To begin, I want to give you a little bit of background on how our project came into being. In the summer of 2010, I traveled to Arusha, Tanzania to work with a nonprofit organization there on malaria workshops. But while I was there, I actually had the opportunity to meet a group of 17 widows in Monduli, Tanzania, who gathered informally to make jewelry, which they sold through missionaries, tourists, or nonprofit organizations that they had connections with. This group of women was extremely eager to expand their business and actually formalize it. And they expressed a real desire to bridge into the U.S. market, the U.S. artisan jewelry market. And so when I came to UVA and found out about the JPC program, this seemed like an ideal project to jump onto because we would be meeting an expressed need rather than trying to implement kind of a top-down project for a group of people that we didn't know very much about. And so with that in mind, we applied to JPC to help these women develop a business strategy to move forward with their jewelry production.
So again, this was an express need from the women. Basically, our primary goal was to give them access to market. So they already had a product that they wanted to sell, and they've been selling it informally. And so we wanted to kind of bridge the resource gap and be able to provide them with resources and connections to be able to enter the U.S. market. And although this was a research project, our goal was for it to be a self-sustaining enterprise so that without us in the picture, the women could run this on their own.
So our project is a little different from everyone else's in that we received an exploratory research grant rather than full travel funding. So we've spent the last year doing a preliminary analysis of the existing market for artisan goods produced on a small scale and looking into and making suggestions for these women as to what trajectories are most feasible for them given their production capabilities. So we spent, at the beginning, we just got to know the women a little better through email communication and learn more about what their goals were in expanding their market and what their limitations were in terms of time, resources, and the amount of the jewelry that they could produce. We then did some research into the market. So we talked with a lot of businesses that are already in this market and how and looked into how these women could, what place their product could have. We started out with a focus group targeted at potential consumers. We wanted to know what their reactions were to this product, what they thought good marketing strategies were, pricing strategies, and how they reacted to goods like this that are produced on a small scale without these intermediaries. We also did, in our market research, we found that a lot of this market is fair trade. So then we did research into fair trade certifications and that kind of thing, and we did conducted surveys, seeing as how fair trade is, how the general public reacts to it, what they know about it, and how that changes their perception of a product if it is fair trade.
So in doing initial market research to see where these goods could be sold, we interviewed a lot of purchasing and import-export managers from different retailers that sell global artisanal goods. So Bridge for Africa and Handcrafting Justice and Chaka Market Bridge are all online sellers of jewelry and other like pottery from around the world. And then I'm sure many of you have heard of 10,000 Villages, which is a retail store. And so some of the things that we really learned about from talking with the employees at these organizations was the import-export process, how different countries have different regulations, and how some are more kind of all along the supply chain of how these goods would get from the artisans, from the producers, to the U.S., to consumers. And there's a lot more complications, especially with the fair trade process of how the distribution channel would have to be structured.
So from talking to all of these pre-existing organizations and businesses, we found that there are kind of 4 different trajectories that an artisan group like the one we are working with can take. And those are personal website, selling through trade shows, wholesale distributors, or direct store sales. And so our initial goal was to start a personal website for these women because they had access to computers, they had the ongoing support of a local finance student, and we just felt that this trajectory would give them the most autonomy to control their own business, and it would provide the most profit for them in the sense that there wouldn't be middlemen cutting into that, which is a huge problem in the artisan market. Some 70% of profits in the fair trade industry actually go to middlemen and not back to the producer, which is not what a lot of people think is the case when they buy these goods. But after doing some introductory research, we found that maintaining a website, paying for PayPal fees, the legal expenses, and then also import-export certification, things of these nature, were just going to cause an upfront capital cost that without outside grants, these women couldn't afford. And furthermore, when we found out that we wouldn't actually be traveling to work with them, it really seemed that the initial startup process for all of this would be too difficult to do when we are here and there in Tanzania. So we moved on to looking at other trajectories, and the one thing that really convinced us that a personal website was not the way to go for these women was our interview with Chaka Market Bridge. They are an established business. They sell artisan goods online, and they have found in recent years that they actually aren't able to make enough sales through their website to sustain their business. So they're bridging into trade shows now, and we felt that if this well-established business that's been around for a few years can't even make enough sales online, then how is a group of women in Monduli, Tanzania going to do that? So we went on to look at trade shows.
So with talking with people at Bridge for Africa and Handcrafting Justice, they kind of expressed that trade shows are usually a pretty viable option for these producers to sell their goods. Unfortunately, with the women's production capabilities and what they wanted to sell, trade shows actually, you have to have bulk quantities to be able to present to online retailers or distributors who are at these shows. In addition, there's actually high price for the tickets for these, and they're in limited quantity, so it's pretty hard to actually get into them. And so with, like I said, with their production capabilities, they couldn't really sell at a trade show in bulk right away.
We then looked into wholesale distribution, magazines or online locations where smaller retail stores buy in bulk from them and then sell at their retail location. These women, again, their production capabilities didn't quite meet the needs of some of these wholesale distribution channels. At the same time, these women are located in a rather remote location, and a lot of these distributors like to find groups of cooperatives that are located in a relatively close geographical area to lower transaction costs. So these women, them being in a remote location was a hindrance to that. In addition, some of these wholesale distributors have other regulations in place. Some require fair trade certification, which requires a large upfront cost to get certified. Others require that there are other programs in place, like educational programs for the artisans to kind of help their human development that these women weren't necessarily looking to be a part of. So again, the transaction cost for wholesale distribution wasn't necessarily the best and most viable option for these women.
So finally, we looked into the possibility of direct store sales, and this means any sales that would take place in a storefront location. So this can be a large retail chain like 10,000 Villages, or small stores like the boutiques that you see on the corner. So we talked to 10,000 Villages, Stella Blue, and numerous other retailers across Charlottesville and in my own hometown. And what we found here is that with large retailers like 10,000 Villages, there are the same requirements that we saw with wholesale distributors. You had to have large production capabilities, there was quality requirements, and many other requirements that these women couldn't meet. But with small stores, a lot of the owners actually already foster personal relationships with the artisans that they're buying from, and so this really seemed like the best possibility for the women that we were working with. And ultimately, this is what we ended up doing. So the women in Monduli are now selling their jewelry in 2 locations. One of them is Pottery by Hand, which is a small jewelry and artisan shop in my hometown of Colonial Beach, Virginia, and they are also selling through an annual art sale that is held at Washington District Elementary School in Oak Grove, Virginia. So these are 2 really small channels through which these women are able to sell their jewelry that have garnered them a total of $500 in revenue since December. However, this essentially provided an example for the type of strategy we thought they should continue to pursue, which is personal relationships with owners of businesses, because given their production capabilities at the time, it's small relationships like this that are going to be fostered through people that are going to be the most sustainable option for them. Thank you.